The blood spread slowly through the white snow, a crimson halo expanding around the broken body of James Mitchell. His breath came in shallow gasps, each exhale creating small clouds of vapor that vanished into the frozen Denver night. Negative 15 degrees? His core temperature had dropped to 91, hypothermia's cruel embrace tightening its grip. Please. The word scraped from his throat, barely audible above the wind howling through the empty street. Help me! I'm already hurt. His trembling fingers clutched a tarnished dog tag, the engraved letters catching the dim streetlight SGTD Thompson from the shadows behind a dumpster. Yellow eyes reflected the moonlight. A German shepherd emerged, its thick black and tan coat dusted with snow. The dog's nose twitched, catching the scent of fresh blood. James's vision blurred as the animal approached, massive paws crunching through ice, then darkness. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Delaram, Afghanistan. 15 years earlier, Staff Sergeant James Mitchell wiped the sweat from his brow, his Marine Corps uniform already soaked through despite the early hour. At 43, he was older than most of the men in his unit, but nobody questioned his leadership. He had earned his stripes the hard way. Mitchell, you ready? Sergeant David Thompson appeared at the tent entrance, his trademark grin splitting his dust-covered face. Behind him trotted a magnificent German shepherd, ears alert and intelligent eyes scanning everything. That sergeant to you? Thompson, James replied, returning the smile. They had been through 3 tours together, their bond forged in firefights and long nights of guard duty. David knelt beside the dog, running his hand through the thick fur. This is Sergeant 2. Well, my sergeant, best canine in the Corps, saved my life twice already. The German shepherd sat at attention, disciplined and calm despite the chaos of military life surrounding them. James watched the connection between man and dog, something pure in a place where purity was hard to find. Final patrol today, David said, his voice dropping. Then we're both going home, me and my boy here. James nodded, checking his rifle. Linda's waiting for me. Sarah just turned 4. Haven't seen her in 8 months. You're lucky, brother. Got family to go home to. David's expression softened as he looked at his dog. This guy's my family. Promise me something, Jim. If anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen. Promise me. If something does, you'll take care of Sergeant. Find him. Make sure he's okay. James met his friend's eyes, seeing something there he had never seen before. Fear, maybe, or premonition. I promise, Dave, but we're both walking out of here. They did not both walk out. The ambush came fast and brutal. David Thompson died in James Mitchell's arms, blood soaking into the Afghan sand. His last words were barely a whisper. Take care of Sergeant. Promise. In the chaos of extraction, the dog vanished. James searched for 3 days, calling until his voice gave out. But Sergeant was gone, swallowed by a country that devoured everything it touched. When James finally boarded the transport home, David's dog tags hung heavy around his neck, a promise unkept. 3 years ago, the demons finally caught up with him. The suburban house in the foothills outside Denver had once been filled with laughter. Linda Mitchell moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, preparing dinner while 16-year-old Sarah studied at the table. The girl had her father's eyes and her mother's determination. She wanted to be a veterinarian. "Mom, do you think Dad will ever tell me about his friend, the one who died?" Sarah asked, not looking up from her biology textbook. Linda's hands stilled over the cutting board. "Your father carries a lot of pain, sweetie. Some stories are too heavy to share." The front door opened, and James walked in. But he was not really walking. He was stumbling. The smell of whiskey preceding him like a herald of everything wrong. Linda's face tightened. "Jim, you promised. You said you'd stop." "I did stop," he slurred, gripping the doorframe. "Stopped at 3 bars instead of 4. Sarah looked up, tears already forming. She had seen this progression, watched her hero father dissolve into someone she barely recognized. The nightmares had started a year after his return. Then came the anger, then the drinking. "Daddy, please, you're scaring me." Something in James's face crumbled. He looked at his daughter, his beautiful, innocent daughter, and saw fear. Fear of him. "I tried to find him," James whispered, though neither woman understood what he meant. I promised Dave. I tried for 12 years. I failed him. I fail everyone." Linda's voice was steady but final. "I can't do this anymore, Jim. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But you won't let me help you. You won't let anyone help you." She placed an envelope on the table. "Divorce papers." James looked at the papers, then at the framed photo on the wall, his family. Smiling, whole, taken just 3 years earlier. Another promise he could not keep. He walked out into the Colorado night without a word. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of sleeping under bridges and in doorways. 3 years of rejecting every form of help. Every letter from the VA. Every attempt Linda made to find him. 3 years of watching his daughter from a distance, seeing her graduate high school without him there. 3 years of punishing himself for David's death, for Sargent's disappearance, for every sin real and imagined. The bank account sat untouched, $47,000 in disability payments and savings. He had not spent a cent. Money for men who deserved to live, he did not. And through it all, the dreams persisted. A black dog in the snow, waiting, always waiting. Until tonight, when the dreams became real. The night James Mitchell left his family. Linda stood at the window for hours, watching the empty street. Sarah had finally cried herself to sleep, and the house felt enormous in its silence. The divorce papers remained unsigned on the table. She had hoped the threat would be enough to shake him awake. Instead, she'd driven him away. "I didn't mean it," she whispered to the darkness. "Come back. Please come back." But he did not come back that night, or the next, or the one after that. 6 months later, Linda hired the first private investigator, then a second, then a third. She called shelters, hospitals, police stations. She walked the streets of Denver with a photograph, asking strangers if they had seen her husband. Most looked away. Some offered sympathetic words. None had answers. Sarah threw herself into her studies with frightening intensity. She got accepted to Colorado State University's veterinary program on a full scholarship. When the acceptance letter arrived, she set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for an hour. He should be here, she said finally. This was his dream for me. Linda wrapped her arms around her daughter, both of them crying into each other's shoulders. That night, Linda made a decision. She found James's old insurance policy, the one from his military service, and kept making the payments. $53 a month, every month, for 3 years, just in case. Sarah began her own search on her 18th birthday. She created a Facebook page, Help Me Find My Father James Mitchell, USMC veteran. She posted his photograph, his last known location, every detail she could remember. Within a week, the page had 10,000 followers. Within a month, 50,000. People claimed to have seen him everywhere: Seattle, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Miami. Sarah chased every lead, driving across state lines on weekends, walking through homeless encampments with his picture clutched in her trembling hands. Each face that was not her father's carved another piece from her heart. The letters piled up in her desk drawer. 36 letters written to a man with no address. She poured everything into them: her first day of college, her first anatomy exam, the day she held a newborn puppy and thought of him. She wrote about her anger, her confusion, her desperate need to understand why loving her was not enough to make him stay. Dear Daddy, the most recent letter began, I'm 19 today. You've missed 3 birthdays now. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just empty. Please come back, or let me know you're okay. Please. She never sent them. How could she? She did not know where he was. But Linda knew something her daughter did not. 2 years into James's disappearance, Linda found his storage unit. The lock had rusted, and inside she discovered boxes of his military belongings. Buried beneath old uniforms and medals, she found a journal. The pages were filled with his handwriting, messy, urgent, desperate, letters to Sarah that he had written but never mailed. Dozens of them. My baby girl turned sick today. I watched her from across the street as she left for school. She's so beautiful. She doesn't need a broken father in her life. Sarah got into CSU. I saw Linda crying with joy on the front porch. I wanted to run to them, hold them both, but I'd only destroy what little peace they've found. I saw Sarah in the park today, studying. She looked happy. That's all I ever wanted. I don't deserve to ruin that happiness with my presence. Linda read every page, tears streaming down her face. He had not abandoned them. He was protecting them the only way his fractured mind knew how, by removing himself from their lives. She began leaving money in places she thought he might find it. She volunteered at shelters, hoping to glimpse him in the food lines. She kept paying that insurance premium, month after month, a lifeline thrown into the void. Meanwhile, Marcus Brennan was planning something terrible. Linda's older brother had never approved of James. Military men make terrible husbands, he had told her before the wedding. But after the divorce, Marcus's disapproval curdled into something darker. His younger brother, Daniel, sweet, gentle Daniel, who had never married, had died in a car accident while driving to comfort Linda after one of her worst nights. Marcus found someone to blame for that accident. If James had not destroyed Linda's life, Daniel would not have been on that road. In Marcus's grief-twisted logic, James Mitchell had killed his baby brother. Marcus owned most of the property around Union Station, an area he had purchased cheap after the 2008 financial crisis. He had promised the city council he would develop affordable housing for veterans. Instead, he planned luxury condominiums. But first, he needed to clear out the homeless population that had claimed the area. They bring down property values, He told his son Travis over dinner one night. We need to encourage them to move along. Travis Brennan was 22 and desperate for his father's approval. He had grown up in the shadow of Uncle Daniel's memory, always feeling like he could never measure up to the uncle who died before Travis was old enough to truly know him. How do we encourage them, Dad? Marcus's smile was cold. You make them understand they're not welcome. Whatever it takes. Travis recruited 2 friends. They started small, knocking over shopping carts, slashing sleeping bags, stealing what few possessions the homeless owned. Most people moved on, but there was always 1 or 2 who refused to leave. Last week, a man named Robert Chen had died. Officially, it was exposure. Unofficially, Travis and his friends had taken his coat and left him in the cold. Marcus had paid them each $500. Tonight, Marcus had a specific target. He had learned that one of the homeless men sleeping in his territory was James Mitchell, his sister's ex-husband, the man who had destroyed his family. Travis had no idea that his latest target was the father of his old high school friend, Sarah Mitchell. They had not been close, but he remembered her quiet, studious, always sad. He had never connected her last name with the broken man his father wanted removed. At 1:30 in the morning on January 7th, Travis Brennan and 2 others approached the corner near Union Station where James Mitchell slept, beneath a pile of cardboard, wearing his only possession of value, an old Marine Corps jacket with photographs sewn into the inner pocket. The attack was swift and brutal. James had been dreaming of Sarah when the first kick landed in his ribs. The pain exploded through his chest, yanking him from sleep into nightmare. He tried to curl into a defensive position, but hands grabbed his jacket, hauling him upright. 3 figures surrounded him, their faces hidden by ski masks in the dim glow of the distant streetlight. "Time to move on, old man," one of them said. Travis Brennan's voice, though James did not know it. "Please?" James gasped, tasting copper. "I'm not causing trouble. I'll go somewhere else." "You'll go nowhere." Another kick, this time to his stomach. James doubled over, retching. "The jacket! Dad said, get the jacket." That was Travis again, his voice uncertain now, younger than his frame suggested. James's hands instinctively clutched the worn fabric. The Marine Corps insignia was faded, barely visible, but inside the lining were the only photographs he had left Linda on their wedding day. Sarah as a baby, Sarah at age 4. The last pictures taken before Afghanistan changed everything. "No, please, not this." His voice cracked. "It's all I have left." One of the men laughed, cruel and sharp in the frozen air. "That's the point." They ripped the jacket from his body. James lunged forward, his fingers catching the fabric for just a moment before a fist connected with his temple. Light exploded behind his eyes. He fell hard onto the ice-covered concrete, his head striking the curb with a sickening crack. Blood, hot against the freezing air, poured from the wound above his ear. More blood from his mouth where his teeth had cut through his lip. His side burned where the kicks had landed, ribs broken, he thought distantly. His Marine Corps training cataloging injuries even as consciousness began to slip. "Oh, God," Travis's voice, horrified. "There's so much blood." "Shut up, he's fine." They always look worse than they are. But James was not fine. He could feel the cold seeping into his bones. Now that the jacket was gone, his core temperature, already low from months of exposure, began dropping faster. His fingers fumbled at his chest, searching for the dog tags he always wore hidden beneath his shirt. David's tags, his promise. They were still there. At least they had not taken those. The three figures retreated, their footsteps crunching through snow. James heard them arguing as they moved away. Travis's voice rising. "That was too much. We should call someone. We call no one. You want your dad to go to prison. You want to go to prison." Their voices faded into the Denver night. James lay in the spreading pool of his own blood, trying to focus on breathing. Each inhale sent shards of pain through his chest. His vision blurred, doubled, then blurred again. The cold was almost pleasant now, a numbness creeping up from his extremities. "This is how it ends," he thought. "Alone in the street, just like I deserve." His hand closed around David's dog tags. "I'm sorry," he whispered to his dead friend. "I never found him. I never found Sergeant. I failed you, brother. I failed everyone." 20 feet away, discarded on top of a dumpster, his Marine Corps jacket lay crumpled. The photographs had scattered when the men rifled through the pockets, looking for money that did not exist. Sarah's face smiled up from the snow, frozen in time at age 4, forever innocent, forever untouched by her father's failures. Travis Brennan walked 3 blocks before he stopped, leaning against a brick wall and vomiting into an alley. His hands shook. His father had promised this would be simple, scare them off. That is all. Make them uncomfortable. But that man back there might be dying. He pulled out his phone, finger hovering over 911. Then he thought of his father's face. The disappointment that was always there. The constant comparisons to Uncle Daniel, who had been perfect in death. Travis had finally done something to make his father proud. How could he ruin that now? He put the phone away in his office, overlooking downtown Denver. Marcus Brennan received a text message. "It's done. He won't be back." Marcus smiled, pouring himself a scotch. One more piece of his past erased. One more reminder of his family's pain removed. In his mind, he was protecting Linda. Even if she would never know it, even if she would hate him if she ever found out, he had already forgotten about James Mitchell, dismissing him as just another problem solved in the pursuit of a more profitable future. But Marcus Brennan had made a critical error. He had assumed James Mitchell would die alone in that street. Another tragic statistic in a city that had learned to look away from its homeless population. Marcus had not accounted for destiny. He had not accounted for loyalty that transcended death. He had not accounted for a promise made 15 years ago in the Afghan desert, and he certainly had not accounted for Sergeant. The German Shepherd had been surviving on the streets of Denver for longer than most strays lasted. At 10 years old, he should have been gray around the muzzle, slow in his movements, ready for a warm bed and gentle hands. Instead, he was lean muscle and sharp instinct, a ghost, moving through alleys and side streets, always searching. He had no name anymore. The humans who occasionally tried to approach him called him different things, buddy or boy or hey dog. But somewhere deep in his canine memory, buried under years of survival and loneliness, he remembered being called Sergeant. He remembered a man's voice saying it with pride. Tonight. The dog was doing what he did every night, searching through dumpsters behind restaurants for scraps, staying ahead of animal control, finding warm places to sleep when the Colorado winter bit too hard. He had learned the rhythms of the city, knew which places were safe and which were dangerous. The scent hit him when he was still 50 feet away. Blood, fresh, human. The dog's nose twitched, sorting through the scents. Male, middle-aged, and something else. Something that made him freeze mid-step, his entire body going rigid. Beneath the copper tang of blood was another scent, one that triggered memories so old they should have been forgotten. Desert sand, gunpowder, sweat and fear and brotherhood. The dog moved toward the scent, abandoning the half-eaten sandwich he had found. His paws made no sound on the snow-covered sidewalk. As he approached, he saw the shape, a man lying motionless, a dark stain spreading around him like wings. The dog stopped 10 feet away, his body language shifting into something between caution and recognition. His ears swiveled forward. His tail, usually tucked low for protection, lifted slightly. The man stirred, his hand moving weakly. His lips formed words that barely qualified as sound. "Please, help me. I'm already hurt." The dog took a step closer, then another. The scent was overwhelming now, drowning out everything else. He knew this human. He had known him in another life, in another world. This human had been there when everything fell apart. This human had called his name in a voice raw with grief. James Mitchell's eyes, unfocused and glassy with shock, registered the animal approaching. He saw the thick coat, black and tan, the powerful shoulders, the intelligent eyes. For a moment, his damaged brain could not process what he was seeing. "Dog," he whispered. Just that, just the observation of reality before him. The German shepherd moved closer still, lowering his head to sniff the man's face, his hands, his chest. And then the dog froze, his nose touching something metal and cold hanging from the man's neck. "Dog tags." The animal's nose traced the engraved letters with an intensity that bordered on desperation. S.J.D. Thompson. The scent on these tags was old, nearly gone, but still, there's still David's scent, mixed with sand and blood and goodbye. James's trembling fingers followed the dog's movement. He felt the dog's breath on his face, warm against the deadly cold. His eyes focused just enough to see what the stoke was examining. And then they traveled upward to the animal's collar, a worn leather collar with a metal plate that caught the distant streetlight. The plate read, S.G.T.D. Thompson. Time collapsed. 15 years vanished in a heartbeat. "Sergeant," James's voice cracked, breaking on the word. "Is that... Oh, God. Sergeant, is that you?" The dog's entire body responded to the name. His tail began to wag. Tentative at first, then stronger. A low whine emerged from his throat, a sound of recognition and relief, and something that might have been joy if dogs could feel such complex emotions. James began to sob, his broken ribs screaming in protest. "You've been looking for me all these years. God forgive me. I forgot you. I stopped searching. I gave up on you." The memories flooded back those desperate days after David's death, crawling through Afghan villages, calling for this dog, making promises to his dying friend that he had failed to keep. The guilt he carried was not just about David's death. It was about this animal, left behind, abandoned in a war zone because James had not tried hard enough. "I'm so sorry," James whispered, his hand reaching out to touch the dog's face. "I'm so sorry, Sergeant, because that is who he was, who he had always been," leaned into the touch. Then, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for a creature who had survived alone for 15 years, he lay down beside James, pressing his warm body against the man's trembling form. The dog's body temperature was nearly 102 degrees Fahrenheit, several degrees warmer than a human's. That warmth began to slow the hypothermia that was killing James Mitchell. Not enough to save him, but enough to buy him minutes, maybe enough to buy him a chance. Sergeant lifted his head and began to bark, not the aggressive bark of a guard dog or the frightened yip of a scared animal. This was different, urgent, commanding, a sound designed to travel. The bark of a military working dog signaling distress. The bark of an animal trained to save lives. The sound echoed off buildings, carrying through the empty streets of downtown Denver, once, twice, 3 times, then again. The dog paused between each series of barks, listening, then resuming. James felt consciousness slipping away again. The warmth of the dog against his side was almost enough to make him believe he was somewhere safe, somewhere that mattered. His hand found its way into the dog's thick fur, fingers tangling there. "Stay," he whispered, though he was not sure if he was asking the dog to stay or if he was asking himself to stay alive. "Please, stop." Sergeant shifted closer, his weight a promise. The dog's bark continued, rhythmic and insistent, a beacon in the darkness. 3 blocks away, Dr. Helen Carter was driving home from an emergency call at the 24-hour veterinary clinic where she worked nights. She had stayed late helping a family whose golden retriever had eaten a bottle of ibuprofen. The dog would survive. The family had cried with relief. Helen was tired, ready for her own bed, already thinking about the coffee she would make in the morning. Then she heard a dog barking in a pattern she recognized from another life, another war. That was a military working dog distress signal. Helen's hands tightened on the steering wheel. She had been a combat medic in Afghanistan before becoming a veterinarian. She knew that sound. She knew what it meant. She turned the car toward the barking. Helen Carter found the scene 2 minutes later. Her headlights illuminated a tableau that made her breath catch. A man lying in a pool of blood, a German shepherd standing guard over him, still barking that unmistakable military cadence. She threw her car into park and grabbed her emergency kit from the trunk, her combat medic training overriding 15 years of civilian life. As she approached, the dog's barking stopped. He watched her with intelligent eyes, assessing whether she was threat or salvation. "Easy, boy," Helen said, her voice steady. "I'm here to help." The dog shifted, allowing her access to the man, but staying close. Helen knelt in the bloody snow, her fingers finding a pulse, weak, thready, but there. She pulled out her phone, dialing 911 while simultaneously checking the man's injuries. "This is Dr. Helen Carter. I need an ambulance at the corner of 17th and Wynn Coop. Male, approximately 60 years old. Multiple trauma, Severe hypothermia, active bleeding from head wound. He's critical. As she worked, applying pressure to the head wound with gauze from her kit, her eyes caught the dog tags hanging from the man's neck. She pulled them into the light. D. Thompson. Helen's hands froze. The world tilted sideways. David Thompson. Sergeant David Thompson. United States Marine Corps, Kandahar Province, 2010. Helen had been 25 years old, a combat medic attached to a Marine unit during the surge. The firefight had erupted without warning. Taliban fighters emerging from compounds they had cleared just hours before. Helen had taken shrapnel to her leg, unable to move, bleeding out in the middle of a street while bullets tore apart the air above her. A Marine had appeared through the smokestack, Sergeant David Thompson, moving with the fearless efficiency of a man who had made peace with death. He had dragged her to cover, shielding her body with his own, calling for support while applying pressure to her wounds. His Cajun partner had stood guard, snarling at the building where the enemy hid. "You're going home, Doc." David had told her, his voice calm despite the chaos. "That's a promise." She had gone home. 3 weeks later, she learned that David Thompson had not. An IED had torn through his vehicle during a routine patrol. She had received a letter from his unit, thanking her for her service, informing her of his death. She had never forgotten his name, but these tags were not on David Thompson's body. They were on this dying man in the Denver snow. And standing beside him was a German shepherd wearing a collar that read, "STD Thompson." "Oh, my God," Helen whispered. "You're his dog. You're Sergeant." The dog's tail moved once. Acknowledgement in the simple gesture. Helen's mind raced. This man wearing David's tags had to be someone David trusted, someone he cared about enough to give his most precious possession. And this dog, 15 years, was impossibly old for a German shepherd to survive on the streets. But here he was, guarding this man with the same fierce loyalty he had shown in Afghanistan. She returned her attention to the man, working faster now. The ambulance was coming. She could hear sirens in the distance, but she needed to keep him alive until it arrived. Then headlights flooded the scene from the opposite direction. A black Mercedes pulled up, and 3 men emerged. Helen recognized the posture immediately, not help, but threat. Marcus Brennan stepped into the light. His expensive overcoat pulled tight against the cold. His eyes widened when he saw Helen kneeling over James, when he saw the dog. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Leave him alone." Helen looked up, her hand still applying pressure to James's wounds. "This man needs medical attention." "Who are you?" "I owned this property. He's trespassing. He's dying." Helen's voice cut like steel. "And I'm not moving until the ambulance gets here." Marcus took a step forward. Sergeant immediately moved to intercept, positioning himself between Marcus and James. The dog's lips pulled back from his teeth, 4-inch canines that gleamed in the headlights' glare. A low growl rumbled from his chest, a sound that promised violence. "Call off your dog," Marcus said. "He's not my dog. And I wouldn't call him off, even if he was." One of the men with Marcus Travis Brennan, though Helen did not know his name, stepped forward with a metal pipe. "Get out of here, lady. This doesn't concern you." Sergeant's growl deepened. His body coiled, ready to spring. Helen had seen military working dogs in action. She knew exactly how much damage they could inflict. This animal might be old, might be half-starved, But he was still trained, still deadly, and he was protecting his human with the last of his strength. "I'm a veteran," Helen said, pulling out her phone and holding it up. "I'm recording this. I've already called 911. The police are coming. If you touch either of us, I have video evidence." It was a bluff. Her phone was in her pocket, not recording anything, but Marcus did not know that. He hesitated, weighing his options. Behind him, Travis's face had gone pale. "Dad, we should go," Travis said, his voice cracking. "We should just go." The sirens were closer now, maybe 2 blocks away. Marcus's jaw tightened. "This isn't over." "Yes," Helen said quietly. "It is." Marcus and his men retreated to their vehicle and disappeared into the night. Just as the ambulance rounded the corner, its lights painting the snow and a blue, paramedics swarmed the scene. Helen gave them a rapid-fire assessment while they worked, loading James onto a stretcher. His core temperature had dropped to 88 degrees, severe hypothermia. The edge of survival. "We need to get him to Denver General now," one paramedic said. As they lifted the stretcher, James's hand reached out weakly. "Searching for something," Sergeant whined, pressing close to the stretcher. "The dog," James whispered. "Don't leave him." Denver police arrived at Denver General Hospital 40 minutes after James Mitchell was admitted to the intensive care unit. Detective Sarah Reeves had been roused from sleep by a call about an assault on a homeless veteran, and something about the case had made her move faster than usual. Maybe it was because her own father had served. Maybe it was because 3 homeless people had died in the past month, all in the same neighborhood, all written off as exposure. Helen Carter met the detectives in the waiting room, Sergeant lying at her feet. The dog had refused to leave, and hospital security had made an exception after Helen explained he was a retired military working dog. "Tell me everything," Detective Reeves said, pulling out her notebook. Helen recounted the scene, the man in the snow, the dog's distress signal, the 3 men who had shown up afterward. She described Marcus Brennan, his Mercedes, his threats. She gave them everything except the bluff about recording, which had become truth when she had actually started recording after Marcus appeared. "Did you get a license plate?" Reeves asked. "Better. I got his name. He said he owned the property. Marcus Brennan." The detective's expression shifted. "Marcus Brennan, the real estate developer." "That's the one who threatened me." "Yes." Reeves exchanged a look with her partner. "That's interesting. We've been looking at him for weeks. He owns most of the properties around Union Station, promised to build affordable housing for veterans. Then suddenly, every homeless person in the area started reporting harassment." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. "Is this the man?" Helen looked at the photo. "That's him." "And these 2? More photos. Travis Brennan and his friends. The younger one was there. Called the man Dad." Detective Reeves smiled, but it was not a pleasant expression. "We just got very lucky. Or rather, Mr. Brennan just got very unlucky." While Helen gave her statement, a trauma surgeon emerged from the ICU. Dr. Nathan Pierce looked exhausted, still wearing his surgical scrubs, battered with blood. "The man you brought in, James Mitchell, according to his ID, is stable, but critical, 3 broken ribs, skull fracture, severe hypothermia, and significant blood loss. Another 15 minutes, and we would have lost him. He paused. There's something else you should know. When we processed his belongings, we found a bank statement in his pocket. He has $47,000 in his account. Helen's eyes widened. He's homeless. Apparently by choice. We also found letters, dozens of them, all addressed to someone named Sarah Mitchell. Love letters from a father to a daughter, none of them mailed. Dr. Pierce's voice softened. He's been living on the streets while having enough money to rent an apartment, and he's been writing to his daughter without ever sending the letters. This man is in profound psychological pain. Does he have family? Can we contact them? We're working on it. The daughter's name is in our system now. Sarah Mitchell, age 19, student at Colorado State University. We've reached out across the city in a small apartment near campus. Sarah Mitchell's phone rang at 3:17 in the morning. She was awake. She was always awake these days. Anxiety, keeping sleep at bay. When she saw Denver General Hospital on her screen, her heart stopped. She listened to the nurse's words in a daze. Your father? Found injured. Critical condition. Can you come? Sarah was in her car 5 minutes later, driving through the pre-dawn darkness with trembling hands. She called her mother, Linda, who answered on the first ring. They found him! Sarah sobbed. Mom, they found Dad. Linda was silent for 3 seconds that felt like eternity. Then, I'm on my way. Back at the hospital, Detective Reeves was in a conference room reviewing evidence collected from the scene. Her partner had obtained a warrant for Travis Brennan's phone based on Helen's testimony and Marcus's ownership of the property. What they found was damning. Text messages between Marcus and Travis going back 6 months. Encourage them to move. Make them understand they're not welcome. Whatever it takes. And from a week ago, that Chen guy won't leave. Handle it. Robert Chen had died of exposure 7 days earlier. The medical examiner had ruled it accidental, but now they had cause to reopen the investigation. Then they found the message from tonight. James Mitchell, Union Station area. He's been there too long. Make him disappear. We've got him, Detective Reeves said, already preparing an arrest warrant. We've got all of them, but the most chilling discovery came from Travis's camera roll. The young man had taken a photo earlier that evening, a screenshot from Sarah Mitchell's Facebook page, the one searching for her father. Travis had shown it to his friends with a message, Holy shit, this is Sarah from high school. We just beat up her dad. The timestamp was 10 minutes after the assault. Travis Brennan had known who James Mitchell was. He had known he had beaten his high school acquaintance's father nearly to death, and he had not called for help. He had not stopped his friends. He had taken a screenshot and done nothing. Detective Reeves felt sick. At 4:30 in the morning, police arrested Marcus Brennan at his home. They arrested Travis and his 2 accomplices at their apartments. All 4 were charged with assault, with intent to cause great bodily harm, conspiracy, and in Marcus's case, witness intimidation for threatening Helen. The investigation into Robert Chen's death was officially reopened as a homicide. While the arrests unfolded, Helen Carter was in the ICU. Having convinced the staff to let Sergeant visit James, the old dog moved slowly through the hospital corridors. his arthritis evident now that the adrenaline had worn off. But when he reached James's bedside, something remarkable happened. James's eyes were closed, his face covered in bandages, machines monitoring his every breath. But when Sergeant whined softly, James's hand moved. His fingers found the dog's head, tangling in the familiar fur. "Good boy," James whispered, the words barely audible. "Good boy, Sergeant. You kept David's promise. You kept it when I couldn't." Helen stepped closer, her own eyes wet. "Mr. Mitchell, my name is Helen Carter. Oh, I'm a veterinarian, but I used to be a combat medic in Afghanistan. David Thompson saved my life in Kandahar, 2010. James's eyes fluttered open, confused and unfocused. "Your friend David made you promise to take care of Sergeant. Didn't he?" Helen continued. "You've been looking for this dog for 15 years. You've been punishing yourself because you thought you failed." A tear slid down James's bruised cheek. "But James, Sergeant found you. After 15 years, through everything, he found you. That's not failure. That's a miracle." Helen paused, then added softly, "There's something else you need to know. Sergeant is sick. He has advanced cancer. The emergency vet who examined him tonight said he should have died months ago. But he didn't. He lived long enough to find you. He lived long enough to save you." James's hand tightened in the dog's fur. His mouth formed words that came out as broken sounds. "How long?" "They don't know. Weeks, maybe, possibly less." Helen knelt beside the bed. "But he's here now. You both are. And your daughter is on her way. Sarah is coming." At the name, James began to shake. "No, she can't see me like this. I don't deserve—" "That's not your choice anymore," Helen said firmly. "You've been making choices for everyone else, for Sarah, for Linda, for yourself. You've been deciding what you deserve and what you don't. But love doesn't work that way, James. Love doesn't ask if you deserve it. It just is." The door opened. Sarah Mitchell stood there, her face pale, her eyes red from crying. Behind her stood Linda, one hand on her daughter's shoulder. James looked at them, his daughter, grown into a woman he barely recognized, his wife, the love he had tried to protect by leaving. He opened his mouth to apologize, to explain, to beg forgiveness. Sarah crossed the room in 3 strides and collapsed against his hospital bed, her arms wrapping round him as carefully as she could manage. "Forgive you, Daddy," she whispered. "Now, forgive yourself." Linda stood at the foot of the bed, tears streaming down her face. She held up a small stack of papers, the letters James had written but never sent. "I found them 2 years ago," she said. "I've been looking for you ever since. I never stopped, James. I never stopped loving you." And there, in that hospital room, with a dying dog at his side and his family surrounding him, James Mitchell finally allowed himself to break. Not the breaking that had sent him to the streets, but the breaking that lets light in. He wept, and his family wept with him, and Sergeant laid his graying head on the bed and closed his eyes. His mission finally complete. 2 days after James Mitchell regained consciousness, the full truth began to emerge in pieces, each revelation reshaping everything they thought they understood. Sarah sat beside her father's hospital bed, reading aloud from the letters he had written, but never sent. Her voice caught on certain passages descriptions of watching her graduate high school from across the street, hiding behind a tree so she would not see him, accounts of following her to her first day of college, making sure she arrived safely, then disappearing before she could notice. "You were there," Sarah's voice broke. "You were always there." James nodded weakly, his eyes closed against the shame. "I thought I was protecting you from me, from what I'd become." Linda stood at the window, arms crossed, processing her own discoveries. The police had shown her the bank statements, the evidence of James's untouched savings. For 3 years, she had struggled with 2 jobs, paying bills and Sarah's college expenses, believing James had nothing. He had been wealthy by homeless standards, and he had chosen suffering. "Why?" Linda asked, not turning around. $47,000. James, you could have gotten help. You could have come home." "I didn't deserve to come home." His words were simple, final, the core belief that had governed 3 years of his life. "David died because I made a wrong call. Sargent disappeared because I didn't search hard enough. You and Sarah deserve better than a broken man who brings nothing but pain." "That wasn't your choice to make," Linda said, finally turning to face him. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. "You decided for all of us what we needed, what we could handle. You took away our right to love you, to help you, to be your family." Sarah set down the letters, her hands trembling. "I spent 3 years thinking you didn't love me enough to stay. Do you understand that, Dad? I thought I wasn't enough." The words struck James like physical blows. He had been so focused on protecting them from his darkness that he had never considered he might be creating a different kind of pain. His daughter had spent her teenage years believing she was unlovable. His wife had spent nights wondering what she had done wrong. "I'm sorry," he whispered, but the words felt inadequate, too small for the magnitude of what he had done. Helen Carter entered the room, Sargent walking slowly beside her. The old dog's condition had deteriorated overnight. The cancer that had been held at bay by sheer determination was now claiming its due. "We need to talk about Sargent," Helen said gently. "I've consulted with oncologists. The tumors are throughout his abdomen. He's in pain, though he's hiding it well. That's what they do. They hide pain to stay useful." James's hand found the dog's head. Sargent leaned into the touch, his tail giving one slow wag. "How long?" James asked. "Days, maybe a week. We can manage his pain, but—" Helen trailed off. "The rest? Unnecessary." Sarah knelt beside Sargent, her hands gentle on his graying muzzle. "He waited for you. He lived 15 years just to find you again." 15 years, James repeated, the enormity of it hitting him. "He's been searching all this time, while I gave up, while I hid." "He never gave up," Helen said. "That's what loyalty looks like. It doesn't quit. It doesn't calculate whether it's worth it. It just keeps going." The words hung in the air, an unspoken rebuke to James's choices. That afternoon, Detective Reeves visited with updates on the investigation. She stood at the foot of James's bed, her expression professional but sympathetic. "Marcus Brennan has been charged with conspiracy to commit assault, intimidation of a witness, and we're building a case for criminally negligent homicide in Robert Chen's death. She said Travis Brennan and his friends are cooperating in exchange for reduced sentences. They've admitted to multiple assaults over the past 6 months. Marcus is Linda's brother, James said quietly. It was the first time anyone had spoken this connection aloud in front of the family. Linda's face went pale. What? Detective Reeves consulted her notes. Marcus Brennan is your brother. Mrs. Mitchell, he claims his actions were motivated by his brother Daniel's death, your younger brother, which occurred 3 years ago. He blamed Mr. Mitchell for destroying your marriage, which led to Daniel's fatal car accident. That's insane, Linda breathed. Daniel's accident had nothing to do with James. He hit a patch of ice on the highway. It was no one's fault. But James understood. He understood because he had been living in the same prison of misplaced guilt. Marcus had found someone to blame for random tragedy, just as James had blamed himself for David's death, for Sargent's disappearance, for every bad thing that rippled out from his choices. He's me, James said. Marcus is doing what I did, taking responsibility for things beyond his control, building a prison out of guilt and calling it justice. The realization settled over the room like snow. Sarah broke the silence. Will he go to prison? Almost certainly. Detective Reeves replied, The evidence is overwhelming, but there's something else you should know. She pulled out her phone, showing them the photo of a journal. We found this in Daniel Brennan's apartment when we executed a search warrant. It's his diary from the year before he died. She read aloud. Saw a homeless vet today near the station. Gave him $20. He cried. I cried. Marcus doesn't understand why I care about these people, but they're human beings. They're somebody's father, somebody's brother. How can we just walk past them? Linda pressed her hand to her mouth. Danny always had the biggest heart. There's more, Detective Reeves continued. Daniel wrote extensively about wanting to volunteer at veteran shelters. He was planning to start a non-profit before he died. Marcus has spent 3 years thinking he was honoring his brother's memory by clearing the streets of homeless people. In reality, he was destroying everything Daniel believed in. The irony was crushing. Marcus Brennan had become the villain in the story his brother had wanted to tell. Will you tell him? James asked. Will you show Marcus the journal? It's evidence. He'll see it eventually. He needs to see it now, James insisted, his voice stronger than it had been since the attack. He needs to understand what he's really done, not for me, for himself, before his guilt destroys Issa the way mine almost destroyed me. Linda moved to James's side, taking his hand for the first time since entering the hospital. Cease. You're worried about the man who tried to have you killed. I'm worried about a man trapped in the same hell I've been living in. James said, Someone needs to throw him a rope. Someone threw me one. He looked at Sargent, at Sarah, at Linda. Several someones. Detective Reeves nodded slowly. I'll make sure his lawyer gets a copy. What happens after that is up to him. After the detective left, the room fell into contemplative silence. Sargent shifted on his bed, a soft whine escaping. James reached down to comfort him, and the dog's eyes met his tired, painful, but still full of devotion. You taught me something. Old friend, James whispered. You taught me that some promises are worth keeping, even when they take everything you have, even when they take 15 years. Sarah wiped her eyes. What promise are you going to keep now? Dad, James looked at his daughter, then at Linda. I'm going to keep the promise I made 20 years ago to be your father, to be her husband, to be present, to be real, to be worth the love you're giving me, even though I don't deserve it. You do deserve it, Linda said firmly. You always did. You just couldn't see it. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over Denver, painting the snow-covered city in shades of gold and pink. A new day, James thought. Maybe even a new life. If an old dog could teach him how to hope again, maybe anything was possible. 6 months passed like pages turning in a book James had never thought he would get to read. The small apartment the VA helped him secure was nothing fancy. A one-bedroom in a building that had seen better days, with thin walls and a radiator that clanged all night. But it had heat, it had running water, it had a bed, and most importantly, it had become a place where his family felt comfortable visiting. Sarah came every Sunday. She would arrive around noon with groceries, having learned that left to his own devices. James would eat cereal for every meal, and they would cook together. Or rather, Sarah would cook while James tried to help and mostly got in the way. "Dad, that's not how you chop an onion," Sarah laughed, taking the knife from his hands. "Did you cook at all when you were on the streets?" "Not much call for sautéing when you're eating from dumpsters," James replied. But he was smiling. He was smiling a lot these days, and each smile felt like a small miracle. The first meal he had attempted, spaghetti. Sarah's favorite from childhood had been a disaster. The pasta had boiled over, the sauce had burned, and the kitchen had filled with smoke that set off the fire alarm. James had stood in the middle of the chaos, mortified, ready to spiral into self-recrimination. But Sarah had just laughed, just like old times. "Dad, you always burned the dinner when Mom worked late. Remember?" He did remember, and in that moment, the memory was not painful, but precious, a thread connecting who he had been to who he was becoming. Linda came on Thursdays. They would sit at his small kitchen table, drinking coffee. She took hers black. He took his with too much sugar and talk. Not about the past, not yet. They were not ready for that. Instead, they talked about small things, the weather, the neighbors. A funny thing that had happened at Linda's job. Slowly, over weeks and then months. The conversations deepened. Linda told him about the 2 years she had spent searching for him, about finding his journal, about keeping his insurance active on the slim hope that someday it would matter. "I never gave up," she said during one of these Thursday visits, "even when Sarah told me I should, even when it seemed crazy. I couldn't. I kept thinking, what if today is the day he comes home?" James reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time he had initiated physical contact since the hospital. Linda's fingers intertwined with his, and they sat like that for a long time, not speaking, just holding on. They were not a couple again, not yet. Maybe not ever in the way they had been, but they were something two people who had loved each other, lost each other, and were carefully, cautiously finding each other again. "I want to try," James said finally, "not rushing, not pretending the past 3 years didn't happen, but I want to try." "Me too," Linda whispered. The hardest work happened on Tuesdays and Fridays, when James attended therapy at the VA Medical Center. Patricia Morgan was a clinical psychologist who specialized in PTSD and survivor's guilt. She was in her 60s, had served in Vietnam as a nurse, and did not tolerate self-pity or excuses. You've spent 15 years punishing yourself for David Thompson's death, she told James during their third session. When do you think you'll have suffered enough? What's the magic number 20 years 30 until you die? James had no answer. Here's the truth you don't want to hear. De Morgan continued, David made a choice in Afghanistan. He chose to protect his unit. He chose to put himself in danger. That was his choice, not yours. And by destroying your life in his name, you're not honoring him. You're wasting the life he died protecting. The words had hit like a punch, but they had also cracked something open inside James. Slowly, session by session, he began to dismantle the prison he had built from guilt and grief. He learned that PTSD was not a weakness, but an injury, like a broken bone that needed time and proper treatment to heal. He learned that loving himself was not a betrayal of David's memory. He learned that being present for his family was not selfish, but necessary. The work was hard. Some days, James left therapy feeling worse than when he arrived, old wounds reopened and raw. But Sarah and Linda were always there, reminding him that healing was not linear, that setbacks were part of the journey. Sargent was there too, at least at first. The old dog had defied every medical prediction. The cancer should have killed him within days of the reunion. But somehow Sargent held on. He moved into James's apartment, claimed the spot beside James's bed, and spent his remaining weeks doing what he had always done, being present, being loyal, being love in its purest form. Helen Carter visited weekly to manage Sargent's pain medication and monitor his decline. She and James had become friends, bonded by shared military service and their connection to David Thompson. He's waiting for something, Helen said during one visit, watching Sargent sleep. Dogs often do this hold on until they know their person will be okay. James knew she was right. Sargent was waiting for permission to go. 8 months after the night in the stool. On a quiet Tuesday evening, James knew the time had come. Sargent had stopped eating. He was too weak to stand. His breathing was labored and painful. The dog's eyes, once so bright and alert, had gone cloudy with suffering. Sarah and Linda came over. They sat on the floor around Sargent's bed, all three of them touching him, letting him know he was not alone. You did good, boy, James whispered, his face pressed against the dog's graying fur. You did so good. You found me. You saved me. You kept David's promise. Helen administered the injection with practiced gentleness. Sargent's labored breathing eased. His pain-tightened muscles relaxed. Tell David, James' voice broke. Tell him I'm okay now. Tell him I'm going to be okay. And thank him for sending you. Thank him for not giving up on me. Sargent's eyes found James's one last time. His tail moved once, barely a twitch. Then his gaze shifted, focusing on something beyond the room, something only he could see. His tail wagged again, stronger this time, joyful, and then he was gone. James held the dog's body and wept for Sargent, for David, for the 15 years of searching and suffering and survival, but also for gratitude, for reunion, for the loyalty that had bridged an impossible distance and saved 2 lives instead of 1. They buried Sargent 3 days later at Fort Logan National Cemetery. because Sargent had been a certified military working dog with service in Afghanistan. He qualified for burial honors. A Marine Honor Guard presented James with a folded flag, and a bugler played taps while snow fell softly on the gathered mourners. The headstone read, Sergeant, K9 USMC, loyal to the end. Beside it, they placed a smaller marker in memory of Sergeant David Thompson, who loved his dog and his brothers. After the service, as people drifted away, James remained at the graveside with Sarah and Linda on either side of him. He's with David now, Sarah said softly. James nodded, unable to speak. He believed it. He had to believe it. The alternative that Sargent's devotion had simply ended in darkness was unbearable. Linda squeezed his hand. Let's go home, Jim. Home. The word still felt foreign, fragile, like something that might break if he held it too tightly. But he was learning to accept love, to believe in its second chances, to understand that healing was possible even after everything had fallen apart. They walked together through the snow, 3 people who had been broken and were slowly becoming whole, carrying the memory of a dog who had taught them that loyalty never dies and love always finds a way home. 2 weeks later, Marcus Brennan's lawyer requested a meeting with James Mitchell. It was held in a conference room at the district attorney's office, with Detective Reeves present and both men's attorneys flanking them. Marcus looked hollow. The expensive suit could not hide the weight he had lost or the shadows under his eyes. His hands shook as he sat down across from James. I read Daniel's journal, Marcus said without preamble. His voice was hoarse. I read what he really believed, what he really wanted. James said nothing, just waited. I spent 3 years destroying everything my brother cared about. I became the exact opposite of who he was, and I did it thinking I was honoring him. Marcus's laugh was bitter and broken. I'm the one who should have been living on the streets, not you. Me? Guilt makes us stupid, James said quietly. Makes us hurt people we love. Makes us become people we hate. I know because I've lived there. Marcus looked up, meeting James's eyes for the first time. How did you get out? I didn't. I was pulled out by people who refused to give up on me even when I'd given up on myself. James leaned forward. My daughter, my wife, a dog who spent 15 years searching. They didn't save me because I deserved it. They saved me because that's what love does. I don't deserve that, Marcus whispered. Neither did I. That's the point. We don't get to decide what we deserve. We only get to decide what we do next. The meeting ended shortly after. Marcus was still facing serious charges, the assault, the conspiracy, the evidence of his campaign against Denver's homeless population. He would likely serve time, but James had agreed not to pursue additional civil action, and he had written a letter to the judge asking for leniency. Why? Linda had asked when James told her, after everything he did to you. Because someone showed me mercy when I didn't deserve it, James replied. Because Marcus is drowning in the same ocean that almost killed me. Because maybe, just maybe, he deserves a rope too. 3 years after that night in the snow, on a crisp October morning, James Mitchell stood at a podium in front of 200 people gathered for the grand opening of the Thompson-Mitchell Veteran Center. The building had once been one of Marcus Brennan's abandoned properties, seized by the city and transformed into something that would have made Daniel Brennan proud. It offered transitional housing for homeless veterans, mental health services, job training, and a specialized program for veterans with PTSD and their families. Marcus himself had contributed the initial funding from the sale of his remaining properties before beginning his prison sentence. It was not redemption, not entirely, but it was a start. James looked out at the crowd: veterans, families, city officials, volunteers. Sarah sat in the front row, now a third-year veterinary student, specializing in therapy animals. Beside her sat Linda, who had moved back in with James 6 months earlier. They had remarried quietly, just the two of them and a judge, understanding that some things do not need grand gestures, just commitment and presence. Helen Carter was there too, running the center's therapy dog program. Travis Brennan, who had served a reduced sentence and was now on probation, volunteered there twice a week, working to undo some of the harm he had caused. James cleared his throat and began to speak. 15 years ago, my best friend died in my arms in Afghanistan. His last words were a request to take care of his dog. Sergeant, I failed that promise. I spent the next 12 years searching, and when I could not find him, I spent 3 more years punishing myself for that failure. I convinced myself I did not deserve happiness, did not deserve family, did not deserve one bit or a second chance. I was wrong. His voice grew stronger. Sergeant found me on the coldest night of my life, when I was dying alone on a street corner. He had survived 15 years alone, sick and starving, but he never stopped looking. He never stopped being loyal. That dog taught me something profound. Loyalty does not require words. Love does not calculate whether someone deserves it. It just shows up. It just stays. It just keeps believing. Even when belief seems foolish. James paused, his eyes finding Sarah's. My daughter never stopped looking for me. My wife never stopped hoping I would come home. They loved me when I could not love myself. They believed in me when I had stopped believing in anything. That is what family means. That is what loyalty looks like in human form. He gestured to the building behind him. This center exists because we believe every veteran deserves that same loyalty. We believe that no one who served this country should die alone in the cold. We believe that mental wounds deserve the same respect and treatment as physical ones. We believe in second chances, third chances, as many chances as it takes. James's voice dropped, intimate now despite the crowd. Some of you here today are struggling. Some of you are carrying guilt or grief that feels impossible to bear. Some of you have convinced yourselves that you do not deserve help, that you should be able to handle this alone. I am here to tell you you are wrong. You deserve help. You deserve love. You deserve a rope thrown into the darkness, whether you think you have earned it or not. He looked up at the sky, clear and blue, and thought of David, thought of Sergeant, thought of all the people who had refused to let him go. We are all connected by invisible threads of loyalty and love. When one of us falls, the rest of us pull. That is what we do here. That is what this center represents. We pull for each other. We show up. We stay. We never stop believing that healing is possible, that redemption is real, that no one is beyond saving. James stepped back from the podium as applause filled the air. Sarah rushed forward to hug him, and Linda joined them. And for a moment they stood there, a family that had been broken and remade, stronger in the broken places. The Thompson Mitchell Veterans Center opened its doors that day. In its first year, it would help over 300 veterans find housing, employment, and hope. Some of those veterans would go on to help others, creating ripples of redemption that spread far beyond what anyone could measure. But perhaps the center's greatest success was not measured in statistics or testimonials. It was measured in the simple fact that no veteran in Denver would ever again have to die alone in the snow, calling for help that never came. Because now, help would always come. Now, someone would always be listening. Now, loyalty would always find a way. If this story touched your heart, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like James, convinced you did not deserve love or help? Or have you been like Sarah and Linda, refusing to give up on someone who had given up on themselves? Every one of us has either been lost or has loved someone who was lost. Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the rope someone else needs today. Tell me, what does loyalty mean to you? And who in your life has shown you unconditional love when you needed it most? Let's build a community of people who refuse to let each other fall. Leave a comment and let us know you are here. Your story matters. Your presence matters. And someone reading this needs to know they are not alone.